Megan Taylor stood in the wings of Lakeside High's auditorium, her heart hammering against her ribs. At 16, she was known for her academic achievements rather than her performing abilities, but tonight would change that. The Spring Talent Show was the biggest event of the year, drawing not just students and faculty, but the entire small town of Millfield. "You're up after Jason," whispered Mrs. Donovan, the drama teacher, squeezing Megan's shoulder. "Remember, just breathe and focus on the back wall like we practiced." Megan nodded, clutching her violin case tightly. 6 months of secret lessons had led to this moment. None of her friends knew she could play, not even her best friend Zach. "Who sat in the third row with a go?" "Megan," sign he'd made despite having no idea what her talent would be. On stage, Jason Chen finished his comedy routine to enthusiastic applause. As he exited past Megan, he gave her a thumbs up. "Knock 'em dead," he said. Principal Winters approached the microphone. "Next up, a student who's full of surprises. Please welcome Megan Taylor." Megan stepped into the blinding lights, her blue dress shimmering under the spotlights as scattered applause welcomed her. She settled on the lone chair at center stage, positioned her violin, and took a deep breath. Then she began to play not a classical piece as her teachers had suggested, but her own arrangement of a popular song that had been climbing the charts that spring. The familiar melody, transformed by the haunting quality of her violin, silenced the restless audience. As the final note hung in the air, there was a moment of complete silence before the auditorium erupted. Standing ovation, Megan's face flushed with triumph as she took a small bow.
Ow.
For once, she wasn't just the smart girl. With the perfect GPA tonight, she was something more. The after-party was held in the school gymnasium, transformed with streamers and punch bowls into what passed for festivity at Lakeside High. Megan, still riding the high of her performance, moved through clusters of congratulating classmates. "Why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" Zach demanded, pretending to be offended but failing to hide his pride. "And miss the look on your face?" "No way," Megan laughed, accepting another plastic cup of punch from him. "Well, it was amazing." "You were amazing," he said, suddenly serious. "Listen, I wanted to ask Taylor." Coach Brennan interrupted, clapping a hand on Megan's shoulder. "Quite a performance. The music department could use someone like you." As Megan was pulled into conversation after conversation, the evening slipped away. By 10:30 p.m., the crowd had thinned considerably. Parents arrived to collect younger students, while seniors with cars offered rides to friends. "Need a lift?" Zach asked, jingling his keys. His older Honda was a point of enormous pride. Megan shook her head. "Mom's picking me up. She texted that she's running late emergency at the hospital." Her mother, a nurse at Millfield General, often worked unpredictable hours. "I can wait," Zach offered. "No need. I have to grab my violin from the auditorium anyway. I left it backstage when Mrs. Donovan asked for help with the props." "You sure? Positive? Go before your curfew?" "I'll call you tomorrow with all the gory details of Mom's emergency room stories." With a quick hug, Zach departed. Megan checked. Her phone, a text from her mother, said she was still 20 minutes away. Plenty of time to retrieve her violin and maybe practice a little more in the empty auditorium. The night had been too perfect to end. She waved to Principal Winters, who was speaking with the janitor by the exit. "Just getting my violin," she explained as she passed them. "Don't be too long," the principal called after her. "We're locking. Up soon." Megan walked down the darkened hallway toward the auditorium, the sound of her dress shoes echoing against the lockers. She pushed through the heavy double doors, stepping into the cavernous space now dimly lit by only the security lights. That was the last time anyone saw Megan Taylor. By midnight, Sharon Taylor was frantic. She had arrived at the school to find it dark and locked. No sign of her daughter. Calls to Megan's phone went straight to voicemail. After checking home in case they had somehow missed each other, Sharon called the police. Officer Dan Reeves responded to the call, initially suggesting that Megan had probably gone to a friend's house without telling her mother. It was a common enough occurrence with teenagers. But when calls to all of Megan's friends yielded nothing, the officer's demeanor changed. "We'll need access to the school," he told Sharon as they stood in her kitchen at 2 a.m. "Let me call Principal Winters." By dawn, Millfield police had established that Megan had entered the auditorium at approximately 10:40 p.m., but had never exited through any of the building's monitored doors. Her violin case was found backstage, but her instrument was missing. Her phone, purse, and jacket were gone as well. Within 48 hours, Megan's disappearance dominated local news. Search parties combed the woods behind the school. Divers checked the lake that gave Lakeside High its name. Detective Lisa Morales, brought in from the larger police department in the neighboring county, established a timeline. Between 10:40, when she entered the auditorium, and 11:15 when the janitor locked up, something happened to Megan. She explained to the growing team of officers. The janitor, Henry Wilson, confirms he checked the auditorium before locking up and saw no one. All external doors were alarmed after hours, and no alarms were triggered. The implication hung heavy in the room. Either Megan had left voluntarily with someone who had access to bypass the alarms, or she had never left the building at all. "We need to search the school again," Detective Morales ordered. "Every closet, every crawl space, every air duct, if necessary." But the second search yielded nothing, as did examination of security footage, which showed no sign of Megan leaving the building. The only camera covering the backstage area had malfunctioned that evening, coincidence that raised Detective Morales' suspicions. As days turned to weeks, theories multiplied. Had Megan run away, overwhelmed by the pressure of being perfect? Had she met someone online who lured her away? Or was the answer more sinister? Had someone at the school taken advantage of the confusion following the talent show? Teachers and staff were interviewed multiple times. Students were questioned about any unusual behavior they might have noticed. Megan's computer and social media accounts were analyzed for clues. Nothing. The investigation continued actively for 6 months before being classified as a cold case. Sharon Taylor refused to give up, appearing on national news programs, establishing a foundation in her daughter's name, and keeping a dedicated phone line open for tips. Zach Chen deferred college for a year, unable to leave Millfield while his best friend's fate remained unknown. But as the first anniversary of Megan's disappearance approached, even the most dedicated began to accept that they might never know what happened to the girl with the violin who had vanished into thin air. 5 years had passed since Megan Taylor's disappearance. If this haunting disappearance is keeping you up at night, take a moment right now to hit the like button and subscribe to Gone Cold. Every click helps us keep these chilling stories alive and remind the world that some questions still have no answers. What had once been front-page news had faded into the background of Millfield's consciousness, a tragic chapter in Thetown's history that people referenced in hushed tones. "Remember that Taylor girl?" they'd whisper. "Such a shame." For Sharon Taylor, however, time had stood still.
Ow!
Her daughter's bedroom remained untouched, a shrine to the 16-year-old who had never come home. Sharon had aged a decade in those 5 years, her once vibrant red hair now streaked with gray, deep lines etched around her eyes. She had left her nursing job at the hospital, unable to bear the sympathetic glances from colleagues, and now worked from home as a medical transcriptionist. On the 5th anniversary of Megan's disappearance, Sharon did what she had done every year. She organized a vigil at Lakeside High's entrance. In the first year, hundreds had attended. By the 5th, the crowd had dwindled to about 30 people, mostly family friends and those who had never given up hope. Zach Chen was among them, driving back from his graduate program at the State University. He had eventually moved forward with his life, but May 15th remained sacred. He stood beside Sharon, holding a candle as they played a recording of Megan's violin performance from that fateful night. "Any news from Detective Morales?" he asked Sharon quietly as the recording ended. Sharon shook her head. "She calls every few months, but there's never anything new." She paused, then added, "They want to declare her legally dead next year. For insurance purposes," they say. Zach's jaw tightened. "She's not dead," he said, with the same conviction he'd maintained for 5 years. "She's out there somewhere." After the vigil, Principal Winters, now graying and near retirement, invited the small group into the school lobby for coffee and cookies. The auditorium remained locked, as it had every anniversary. No one wanted to disturb what had become, in many ways, a crime scene, even though police had long since finished their investigation. As people mingled, Sharon found herself beside Henry Wilson, the janitor who had been the last person to check the auditorium the night Megan vanished. "Mrs. Taylor," he acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I still look for her, you know. Every night when I'm locking up. I check all the places they already searched 100 times." Sharon squeezed his arm gratefully. "I know you do, Henry." Henry, in his 60s now, with a stooped posture from decades of maintenance work, had been questioned extensively during the investigation. His alibi had checked out security footage showed him elsewhere in the building when Megan disappeared, but he still carried a burden of guilt for not somehow preventing whatever had happened. "I'm retiring next year," he told her, "but I promised myself I wouldn't until ... He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Sharon understood. Until Megan was found. Until there were answers. Until the mystery that had consumed their town for half a decade was finally resolved. Neither of them could have imagined that. It would take another 6 years before Henry Wilson would fulfill that promise in a way no one expected. As years continued to pass, Lakeside High School underwent significant changes. Principal Winters retired. The old gymnasium was renovated. New teachers replaced those who had known Megan personally. For incoming freshmen, her story was just that, a story, a local legend. Something older siblings or parents mentioned when passing the memorial plaque near the auditorium entrance. The 10th anniversary of the disappearance came and went with a smaller vigil than ever. Detective Morales, now promoted to captain, still called Sharon every few months. But these calls had become formalities rather than active updates on an investigation. Megan had been declared legally dead, though her case remained open. Zach Chen, now Dr. Chen, with a PhD in audio engineering, had moved back to Millfield to teach at the community college. He still visited Sharon regularly, bringing groceries and helping with household repairs. They rarely spoke about Megan anymore, because they had forgotten, but because they had said everything there was to say in the absence of new information. Sharon had finally packed away most of Megan's things, keeping only a few precious items displayed in the living room. Her violin bow, the violin itself, had vanished with her, a framed photo from her 15th birthday, and the program from the talent show, encased in a small glass frame. Lakeside High had been scheduled for a major renovation project, starting with the auditorium. The space hadn't been significantly updated since the 1980s, and the school board had finally approved funding to modernize it. Completely new seating, improved acoustics, state-of-the-art lighting, and sound systems. "They're gutting it completely," Henry Wilson told Sharon when he visited her on his 72nd birthday. Although officially retired for 2 years, he still maintained connections with the school staff. "Starting next month, everything's coming out?" Sharon nodded, unsure how to feel. Part of her wanted the auditorium preserved exactly as it had been the night Megan disappeared. Another part recognized the futility of clinging to a space that had yielded no answers for over a decade. "Will you be there?" she asked. "When they start the demolition?" Henry nodded solemnly. "Wouldn't miss it. I made a promise." The renovation began on a sweltering June morning, 11 years and 1 month after Megan Taylor vanished. A construction crew arrived with equipment to remove the old seating, lighting fixtures, and eventually the stage itself. The current principal, Dr. Abigail Martinez, had invited Henry Wilson to be present as an honorary consultant. Recognizing his decades of service and intimate knowledge of the building's quirks, "You'll want to be careful with the orchestra pit," Henry advised the foreman. "The hydraulic system hasn't been serviced in years. The orchestra pit, a recessed area in front of the stage that could be raised or lowered, depending on performance needs, had been kept in its lowered position and covered with heavy panels since the renovation of the music program 8 years earlier. The school orchestra had been discontinued due to budget cuts, making the pit unnecessary. As workers removed the panels to assess the hydraulic system, Henry stood at the edge, peering down into the dark recess. The beam of a worker's flashlight swept across the space, illuminating years of dust and forgotten items: pencils, paper clips, a broken drumstick. "Shine that over here," Henry suddenly requested, pointing to a dark corner where the pit extended slightly under the stage. The worker complied, redirecting his light. There, wedged in the narrow space, was something that didn't belong: a violin case. It's dusty and weathered, but unmistakable. Henry's heart seized in his chest. "Stop everything," he called out, his voice cracking. "Call the police now." Within an hour, yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the auditorium. Detective Lisa Morales, gray-haired but still sharp-eyed, arrived. Personally, to oversee the recovery of the violin case. Sharon Taylor was notified, but asked to remain at home until they knew more. As forensic technicians carefully extracted the case from its hiding place, Morales stood beside Henry, who looked shell-shocked. "It was right there," he kept saying. All this time, it was right there. "The pit was checked during the initial investigation," Morales reminded him gently. "It was on-off the first places we looked." "It was raised then," Henry said. "It was only lowered a year later when they did maintenance. The case must have been hidden somewhere else initially, and then, ... double quotes, he couldn't complete the thought. Technicians finally brought the case to a table set up on the stage. Morales pulled on gloves before carefully opening the latches. Inside, preserved in the airless space beneath the stage, was Megan Taylor's violin, the instrument that had disappeared along with her. But that wasn't all. Tucked into the lining of the case was a small notebook, its pages filled with hurried handwriting. Morales read the first page and immediately stepped away, pulling out her phone. "Get Sharon Taylor here now," she ordered. "And someone find Zachary Chen." Henry, who had backed away to give the professionals space to work, noticed something else: a small door, almost invisible against the paneling, at the back of the orchestra pit, where it met the underside of the stage. It appeared to lead into a crawl space or service tunnel. "Detective," he called, pointing. "I don't remember that being there." As additional officers arrived to secure what had suddenly become an active crime scene once again, Morales approached the small door with a growing sense that the 11-year-old mystery of what happened to Megan Taylor might finally be unraveling. What they would discover behind that door and within the pages of Megan's notebook would shock the entire town of Millfield. Bringing both long-awaited answers and painful new questions, Sharon Taylor arrived at Lakeside High within 20 minutes of receiving Detective Morales' call. Her hands trembled as she was escorted past the crime scene tape into the auditorium, where her daughter had vanished 11 years earlier. The sight of the violin case on the evidence table made her gasp. "Is it hers?" Morales asked gently, though she already knew the answer. Sharon nodded, unable to speak. The worn case with the small butterfly sticker in the corner was unmistakably Megan's. She reached toward it instinctively before pulling back, remembering the protocols of evidence handling. "We found this inside," Morales said, showing her the notebook through its clear evidence bag. "I haven't read it fully yet, but the first page, ... double quotes." Sharon took the bag with shaking hands. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, the slightly slanted letters, the way Megan crossed her T's with a flourish. The first page was dated May 15th, the night of the talent show. "If anything happens to me, this is the truth. After my performance tonight, Mr. Winters told me he needed to speak with me privately about a music scholarship. He said to meet him in the auditorium after the party. Something feels wrong about this. He's never shown interest in my music before today. I'm writing this just in case, but I'm probably being paranoid. Still, I'm hiding this notebook in my violin case. If you're reading this and I'm not around, start by asking why the backstage camera mysteriously stopped working tonight." Megan Sharon looked up, her face drained of color. "Principal Winters? That's not possible." Detective Morales' expression remained professionally neutral. "We're locating him now. He retired to Florida 5 years ago." Zach Chen burst through the auditorium doors, having left his summer class mid-lecture after receiving the call. His eyes widened at the sight of the violin case, then narrowed as he saw Sharon's expression. "What is it? What did you find?" While Sharon and Zach were briefed on the notebook's contents, a forensic team was examining the small door discovered at the back of the orchestra pit. After photographing it extensively, they carefully opened it to reveal a narrow maintenance tunnel, off forgotten feature from when the building had been constructed in the 1960s. "This wasn't on any of the school blueprints we reviewed during the original investigation," Morales noted, watching as crime scene technicians prepared to enter the confined space. Henry Wilson, still present as the discoverer of the violin case, shook his head in disbelief. "I worked here for 40 years and never knew about this tunnel. It's not part of any maintenance routes we used. The tunnel, barely wide enough for an adult to crawl through, extended beneath the stage area and appeared to connect to a small mechanical room. Behind the auditorium, a room that had been converted to storage decades ago. The dust inside the tunnel was disturbed, showing signs that someone had used it, though it was impossible to determine how recently. As the technicians emerged from their initial inspection, one of them handed Morales a small evidence bag. Found this about halfway through the tunnel, ma'am. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a heart-shaped charm. Engraved on the heart were the initials Mount. Morales immediately showed it to Sharon, who covered her mouth to stifle a sob. It was her 16th birthday present from me. She confirmed she was wearing it the night she disappeared. The discovery transformed what had been a promising lead into something far more ominous. The tunnel provided a means by which someone could have moved through the building undetected by security cameras or alarms, and the bracelet confirmed that Megan had been there. "We need ground-penetrating radar," Morales ordered. "Check every inch of this tunnel and the connecting rooms. And get me everything we have on Principal Winter's financial records. Travel history, phone records from 2011." As the investigation ramped up with renewed urgency, Sharon clung to Zach's arm, both horrified by the implications of what they'd found and desperately hopeful that after 11 years, they might finally learn the truth about what happened to Megan. Former Principal Robert Winters was located at his retirement community in Naples, Florida, by the end of the day. Local police placed him under surveillance while Detective Morales arranged to fly down with a colleague. At 73, Winters had built a comfortable retirement life, serving on the community board and organizing weekly golf tournaments. The notebook had revealed more disturbing details. In entries dating back months before her disappearance, Megan had documented increasingly uncomfortable interactions with Winters' compliments that felt inappropriate, lingering looks, inconvenient. Meetings in empty hallways, she had told no one, worried about accusing such a respected figure without proof. "She never said a word to me," Sharon whispered as she and Zach read through the notebook pages together in Morales' office. "Why wouldn't she tell me?" "She was protecting you," Zach realized, pointing to a passage. "Look." Megan had written, "Mom's already working double shifts to pay for college. If I cause trouble with the principal, I might lose my shot at a scholarship. I need to handle this myself." While forensic teams continued processing the tunnel and the connected rooms, searching for any trace of what had happened 11 years ago, Detective Morales and her partner arrived at Winters' Florida home. Their knock was answered by a tanned, silver-haired man who smiled pleasantly until they identified themselves. "This is about the Taylor girl, isn't it?" he asked, his demeanor shifting almost imperceptibly. "May we come in, Mr. Winters?" Morales requested formally. The interview room at the Naples Police Department was stark and functional, a sharp contrast to the tropical decor of Winters' home. He sat calmly across from Morales, maintaining his composure as she placed photographs of the violin case and the notebook on the table between them. "I had nothing to do with Megan Taylor's disappearance," he stated firmly. "I was with the janitor, Mr. Wilson, when she went to retrieve her violin, and then I left through the main entrance." The security footage confirmed that. "The footage showed you leaving," Morales acknowledged. "Though we now know there was another way back into the auditorium. A maintenance tunnel that doesn't appear on the school blueprints." For the first time, Winters' confident facade faltered. "What? I don't know what you're talking about." "We found Megan's violin case hidden in the orchestra pit," Morales continued, "along with a notebook documenting her concerns about your behavior toward her in the months leading up to her disappearance." Winters' eyes darted to the door, as if calculating an escape that wasn't possible. Anyone could have written that notebook, he argued. "It proves nothing." "We also found her bracelet in the tunnel," Morales added, watching his reaction closely. "DNA testing is already underway on several hairs recovered from the same location." As the interview continued, back in Millfield, the forensic team made another discovery in the small mechanical room connected to the tunnel. A section of recently replaced drywall. It's different from the surrounding material. As they prepared to open the wall, no one was prepared for what they would find behind it, or how it would change everything they thought they knew about Megan Taylor's disappearance. The forensic team carefully removed the section of drywall in the mechanical room, working methodically to preserve any evidence. As the final piece came away, a collective gasp filled the room. Behind the wall was a small alcove, and inside, it wrapped carefully in plastic, was a USB drive, a set of keys, and a faded Polaroid photograph. The photograph showed a teenage girl, clearly Megan Taylor, looking frightened, her hands bound with zip ties. Appeared to be in a basement or cellar with concrete walls. On the back of the photo, written in handwriting that didn't match Megan's, were the words, "Insurance, RW plus JB." Detective Morales was immediately contacted in Florida, where her interrogation of Robert Winters had reached a stalemate. When informed about the discovery, she placed the photograph of the evidence on the table in front of Winters. "JB," she said flatly. "That would be James Brennan, coach at Lakeside High when Megan disappeared." Winters' composure finally shattered. His shoulders slumped as 11 years of secrets became too heavy to carry. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he whispered. "It was Brennan's idea. He said she knew too much about the embezzlement." In Millfield, officers were already en route to James Brennan's current address. The former coach had left Lakeside High 8 years ago to take a position at a private school in Oregon. The USB drive, quickly examined by forensic IT specialists, contained financial records showing that Winters and Brennan had been siphoning funds from school accounts and athletic department fundraisers for years. She figured it out, Zach realized. As he and Sharon reviewed copies of the files, Megan was treasurer of the student council. She would have had access to some of these records. But the most crucial piece of evidence was the set of keys. One was labeled with a faded tag, Lake Cabin. James Brennan's lake cabin was located just outside Millfield County lines, in a remote wooded area where he had claimed to go fishing on weekends. Local authorities secured the property within hours of the discovery in the mechanical room. At first glance, the cabin appeared abandoned, with years of neglect evident in its overgrown surroundings. Inside, a thick layer of dust covered sparse furnishings, but the basement told a different story. Detective Morales, having rushed back from Florida after Winters' confession, led the search team down the narrow stairs. The basement had been divided into 2 sections: a main room with typical storage, and a smaller room secured with a heavy padlock door, a door that matched one of the keys found in the wall. As officers prepared to open the door, tensions ran high. 11 years had passed, and expectations of what they might find had been tempered by time and experience. The room beyond was small, with a cot, a table, and a sink. It had been designed as a makeshift living space, with evidence suggesting long-term confinement. But it was empty of any human remains. Instead, on the table lay a weathered leather journal, different from the notebook found in the violin case. The final entry was dated just 2 years ago, written in a mature version of Megan's handwriting. 9 years in this prison. Winters checks on me less frequently now, maybe once every few months. Brennan hasn't been here in over a year. I think they're planning to end this soon, one way or another. I've removed the screws from the window frame. Tonight, when he leaves, I'm getting out. If anyone finds this, tell my mother I love her. Tell Zach I'm sorry I missed his graduation. I don't know if I'll make it, but I have to try. Beneath the journal was a crude map drawn on the back of an old electric bill, showing the route from the cabin to the nearest highway. Next to it lay a broken necklace. One Sharon confirmed had belonged to her daughter. She escaped, Morales said, surveying the scene. 2 years ago, she got out. The nationwide search for Megan Taylor intensified following the discoveries at the cabin. Her case, now transformed from a disappearance to a kidnapping and false imprisonment, captured national headlines. Her photo age progressed to show. Her, at 27, appeared on news broadcasts across the country. Robert Winters and James Brennan both faced multiple charges. Winters, seeking leniency, provided a full confession. Megan had overheard them discussing the embezzlement scheme when she returned to the auditorium. Rather than risk exposure, they had drugged her and transported her through the maintenance tunnel to Brennan's car, eventually taking her to the cabin. They had planned to kill her, but neither could bring themselves to commit murder. Instead, they kept her imprisoned, telling her that if she attempted to escape, they would harm her mother. For years, they had maintained this arrangement, with Brennan as the primary jailer and Winters occasionally checking in. As time passed and the investigation cooled, they grew complacent, never realizing that Megan was methodically working on an escape plan. 3 weeks after the cabin discovery, a call came into the tip line from a women's shelter in Seattle. The director reported that a woman matching Megan's description had been staying there for nearly a year. Using the name Emma, she had arrived, disoriented and malnourished, claiming to have escaped an abusive situation but unwilling to provide details. When shown the news coverage of the case, she had broken down and confessed her true identity. Sharon Taylor and Zach Chen flew to Seattle. Immediately, at the shelter, they waited in a small meeting room, both too overwhelmed to speak. When the door finally opened, the woman who entered bore only a passing resemblance to the 16-year-old who had sappered. Now 27, Megan was thin but strong, her once-long hair cut short, her eyes carrying a wariness that hadn't been there before. For a moment she stood frozen in the doorway, staring at her mother and best friend as if they might vanish. Then Sharon opened her arms, and Megan collapsed into her embrace. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. "I wanted to come home, but I was afraid they'd find me. Afraid they'd hurt you. You're safe now," Sharon assured, her clinging to her daughter as if she might disappear again. "It can never hurt any of us again." Later, as the three sat together, Megan explained how she had survived her captivity by focusing on memories of home and planning her escape. When she finally broke free, she had been too traumatized and disoriented to go to the police. Convinced that Winters and Brennan would somehow find her, she had made her way across several states, working odd jobs and keeping to herself, before finally finding refuge at the shelter in Seattle. "I started playing music again 6 months ago," she told them, a small smile breaking through her tears. "The shelter had an old violin. It felt like coming back to myself somehow." In the months that followed, Megan began the long process of reclaiming her life. She testified against her captors, who received lengthy prison sentences. She reconnected with family and friends, and slowly, with therapeutic support, began to heal from her trauma. 1 year after her return, she stood once again on the stage of Lakeside High's newly renovated auditorium. The space had been dedicated to survivors of violent crimes, with a special plaque honoring those who never came home. As part of the ceremony, Megan had been asked to play. With her mother and Zach in the front row, she lifted her new violin, a gift from the community that had never stopped searching for her, and began to play. The piece was her own composition, moving from darkness into light, telling a story of survival and homecoming that words alone could never express. As the final note echoed through the auditorium, she looked out at the faces watching her, some familiar, many new, all part of the community that had kept her memory alive for 11 years. Then she lowered her violin and spoke into the microphone. "For the first time, my name is Megan Taylor," she said, her voice steady and clear. "And this is where my story begins again. And now we have to ask you, what do you think was hidden in that auditorium all these years? Why did no one find it sooner?" Share your theories in the comments below. Don't forget, like this video, subscribe to Gone Cold, and help us make sure these mysteries are never forgotten.